Oh, este va a ser el peor video de la historia. Es que salí tarde de la escuela, entonces ya está un poquito oscuro. O sea, salí temprano, pero luego tuve que hacer un trabajo en equipo, entonces salí un poquito tarde y ahora está oscuro y... ¡Oh, olvidé prender la luz! ¡No! Me dicen si hay alguna diferencia. Yo me voy a dar cuenta ya cuando esté editando, porque la verdad es que no sé si hace diferencia. ¿Hace diferencia? Espero que sí. Es una video reacción a un video llamado 10 Most Expensive Cars. No, what the fuck, este no es el video. Todo está saliendo mal. No, la vida es una mentira. No, no es una mentira, es una... La vida, no sé, está saliendo mal todo. Bueno, este video se llama 10 Biggest Lies Ever Told in History. Entonces, a ver qué tal. Me ayudarías mucho si te suscribes. Sé que apenas está al inicio y es molesto que alguien te diga al inicio que te suscribas, pero suscríbete por favor, me ayudarías muchísimo. Lo apreciaría un montón. Te quiero mucho si te suscribes. Muchas gracias. Y ahora sí, al video. Trataré de no pausarle mucho para editarlo lo más rápido posible y subirlo lo antes posible.
Trust everything you see on the internet, but as it turns out, we shouldn't believe everything that we're taught in school either. Our textbooks are overflowing with exaggeration.
Sí, los libros están desactualizados.
Downright lies. Can the Great Wall of China really be seen from space? Is it true that genius
Probablemente
Albert Einstein actually failed math class in high school?
No es cierto.
What nonsense have we been spoon-fed? Let's dive in and find out. All right, ladies and gents, let's kick off this
Machu
countdown
Picchu.
of
Ah,
lies.
qué bonito.
When you think of world wonders, what comes to mind first? Machu Picchu,
Machu
the pyramids,
Picchu.
or the Great Wall of China?
Las
For us,
pirámides.
it's the latter, and for good reason. Because what other world wonder is visible from space? Exactly. But here's the thing. The so-called Great Wall isn't even that great. The truth is that it simply cannot be seen from outside of our atmosphere. Even from the moon, which in the grand scheme of the universe is relatively
Eso siempre se me hizo muy raro, o sea, ¿por qué alguien creería que sí se puede ver desde el espacio?
Cannot see the
No
wall
tiene
from a
sentido.
low Earth orbit, despite it being 13,170 miles long. While it is a masterpiece of ancient engineering, it is not as big as you think. In terms of width, it's only 20 feet at the bottom and 16 feet at the top. This myth first started circulating in the mid-1700s. However, that's way before we made it up onto
¿Esto es
the
de
moon
Lego?
and started putting
Parece de
satellites
Lego.
into space. While over 10 million people visit the winding Great Wall of China every year, unfortunately, it's
10
not
millones
big
al
enough
año.
to be seen
Wow.
from the stars. Myth busted. Now, if you ever took a history class at school in the USA, we're pretty sure that you've heard of a certain George Washington. No, not George Washington Carver, the man who invented peanut butter, but George Washington,
Oh, qué
the
rico.
founding father
Peanut
who
butter.
served as first president of the United States from 1789 to 1797. We've always been told of this famous tale
Es
about
muy
him and his
famoso,
dad
incluso
and the
en
cherry
lugares
tree,
que no es
and we've come to accept
Estados
it
Unidos,
wrongly
entonces he
as
escuchado
fact.
de él.
If you need a quick refresher, here's the story in rapid time. Little 6-year-old George Washington was given a hatchet from Dad for his birthday. George used it to cut down his dad's favorite cherry tree. Dad was mad and confronted George, who instead of denying it, said the famous words, quote, "I cannot tell a lie." Here's the thing though, "I cannot tell a lie" was a lie. Even though Washington was already a great dude, a biographer named Mason Locke Weems exaggerated his notable characteristics even further. Weems simply made up the tale to highlight Washington's honesty.
Esto no es
and
tan
his
impresionante, o sea, simplemente es un error
If you
histórico
hadn't
y
quite
ya.
quenched your thirst for
Listo.
mind-blowing revelations about world wonders, then fret not, because we've got an absolute doozy about the pyramids coming right up here. If we asked you to tell us who built the pyramids, what would your response be? The ancient Egypt?
Este de acá se parece un poquito a Ra, el dios de egipcio. No sé si es Ra o Thoth. Déjenme ver. Ok, este de acá es Ra. Y ahora tenemos a Thoth. El del video se parece más a Thoth.
Right? The wealthy put slaves to work, dragging incredibly heavy stones up slopes until finally they created an unforgettable landmark. Well, that's not quite true either. Sorry to burst your bubble, pharaohs, but the majority of the manpower was in fact not the slaves. That's what the 19th century scientists thought, but in reality, it was the entire healthy population of ancient Egypt.
Damn.
Over a span of 85 years, between
Pues eso está bastante
2589
bien.
and 2504 BCE,
Qué positivo que haya
that
sido
put
así.
blood, sweat, and tears into their national icon. For those
Esto debe estar un poco triste, o sea, que tú y tu pueblo se esfuercen y no le dejen la tarea a los esclavos nada más, o tal cual de plano no se la dejen a los esclavos. Entonces se esfuerzan, pero no sé, cientos de años después unos científicos le adjudican el trabajo a los esclavos. Entonces trabajaste en vano y aparte eres visto como un pedazo de mierda por tener esclavos.
Those who weren't physically hauling the stone, they were preparing food for the builders, housing them, acting as security, and some even headed out on long journeys in search of stone and metal. After all of that cumulative work, it paid off.
Wow.
The pyramids are the only wonder of the ancient world that still stands today. If you're curious, it's these ones that are long gone.
La estatua
Joining
de
the
Zeus.
Liar Liar Pants on Fire party
Zeus.
next is the one and the only, the totally fake Loch Ness Monster. We know this isn't exactly a giant shock because it's always been speculative evidence supporting Nessie's existence, but the real lie in this case is the so-called surgeon's photo. This photo, the one that helped Nessie to transition from an urban legend into a realistic and frightening possibility. This is the Loch Ness located in Scotland, and the stories of a mysterious creature swimming around in its waters actually go back to the 6th century CE.
Damn.
The first shred of evidence, well, false evidence technically, was taken by Robert Kenneth Wilson in 1934 and was assumed to be accurate
Estaría
for
increíble
close to
que
60
existiese.
years. However, all good things must come to an end, and in
Estaría increíble que
1994, it was
existiesen
revealed
muchas
that the
cosas
shape of
que no
Nessie was
existen.
nothing more than a toy submarine in disguise. What was a toy submarine doing there? Long story short, it was deliberately placed by a man named Marmaduke Weatherall. He used to work for the Daily Mail.
Marmaduke.
And
Buen
after
nombre.
they ridiculed
Eso es
him
un
for
buen
writing
nombre,
a piece
tenemos que
about
admitirlo.
Nessie's footprints, which turned out to be false, he got his revenge, fooling the newspaper as well as everyone else. Oh, we've actually got an entire video
inteligente.
about Nessie. After this one, check it out. The link is in the description.
Era todo un chat.
Alrighty, moving on. Okay, when you think of a Viking, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Besides the boats. That's right, it's those big horned helmets.
Ah, sí leí de que no
Well,
tienen esto.
We're sorry to say it, folks, but that too is a lie. It's just a stereotype that emerged as the result of Vikings becoming more and more prevalent in mainstream media. As it turns out, however, historians have looked at a number of Viking tombs, and not once have they ever found a helmet that had horns. Yes, Scandinavians probably did sport some sort of headgear when they marched into battle, but there is no reason to believe that it was bedazzled with horns.
¿De dónde habrá
In fact,
salido
that
eso de
would
los
actually make
horns?
it easier for the
Los
enemy
cuernos.
to grab and remove. So where did the idea come from?
Igual,
The popular image of a
ese
Viking
como
we know
estereotipo de
today
los-
actually dates back to
Igual ese estereotipo de que cuando te imaginas a un pirata tiene como un parche en el ojo. Probablemente solo fue uno que fue muy famoso y listo. O tal vez ni siquiera existió tal uno así y simplemente es un invento de la industria del entretenimiento. Puede ser, no lo sé.
the 1800s. It was then that Scandinavian artists like Gustav Malmström drew the horned headgear in their portrayals of the Viking people. It's like Gustav
Me gusta su cara, se ve bastante guapo. Tenemos que admitirlo.
Malmström drew the horned headgear in their portrayals of the Viking people. And then, well, it just stuck. Speaking of unique outfits, our next fib is
Michael
about
Jackson.
the former king of pop, Michael Jackson himself.
She was
No matter
more
how you
like
feel about
a
him as a
good
person and all the
queen,
controversy surrounding him,
Rosie.
it's impossible to deny that he had a monumental impact on the music industry. When he wasn't releasing
Definitivamente.
toe-tapping, chart-topping hits, he was creating dance moves like the moonwalk.
Michael Jackson es uno de los
Fans
mejores de la
around the world
historia,
will try to imitate in
músicos.
front of their mirrors at home. Sorry to burst your moon bubble, but that captivating moonwalk wasn't actually invented by MJ. Sure, he showed it to the
Sí,
world
no,
when he
tal
was
vez lo
performing Billie
inventó
Jean at
James
the
Brown o
Motown
algo así.
25th anniversary
No
live
sé.
show in 1983, but it wasn't his to show off. Jackson actually learned it from Casper Candidate and Cooley Jackson, who performed it
Okay.
on Soul Train in the 1970s.
Damn.
Even Marcel Marceau, aka Bip the Clown, showcased the move prior to MJ. And even before those guys, the move's inaugural performance came from tap dancer Bill Bailey. Back then, it wasn't even called the moonwalk. Any guesses? The backslide. Okie dokie, so who here has ever
Okay.
heard of something called carbon dating? No, it's got nothing to do with Tinder. It's a method used to analyze materials
Chistoso,
that
muy
once
chistoso,
exchanged carbon
tipo del
dioxide
video.
into the atmosphere and decipher when that exchange happened. What? In other words, archaeologists used
What?
carbon dating to determine when things were living. We thought that this method was a great way to measure when trees, humans, animals, and plants thrive.
No me digas que eso es falso.
The
Lo del
professor who
carbono
produced
12 o
the
13,
carbon
algo así.
dates way back in 1949, Willard Libby was given the Nobel Prize. So, as you can see, the scientific world took it pretty darn seriously. But since then, scientists have actually recognized that carbon dating is subject to error. Why? because of a variety
Obviamente.
of factors, including contamination by outside sources of carbon in the environment. This affects the natural decay and makes the evidence all a little wishy-washy. Plus, other elements like the fact that the same plant, one in America and one in Greenland, for example, can grow in different eras due to things like temperature variations. So if carbon dating isn't actually accurate, then a lot of history as we know it could in fact be a lie. Spooky.
Spooky.
Okay, you might not be old enough to remember this. We certainly aren't.
Oh, qué
but
bonito
there
estilo
was
de
a time
caricatura.
where the big tobacco companies ran advertising campaigns that said, and we are not kidding, cigarettes are good for your health. These days we are all well
Damn.
aware of the health risks, so we won't dwell on them. But back in the mid-1900s,
Tal vez uno o dos puede ser bueno porque te desestresa.
sell cigarettes.
No lo sé, la
In
verdad.
1951, L&M advertised their filters as just what
No
the doctor
fumen.
ordered.
Es
In
tonto.
1949, an advertisement for Viceroys featured a dentist that told the customers that, as your dentist, I would recommend Viceroys. In the 1920s and 30s, Lucky
Sell
Strike
out.
used celebrity
Vendido.
endorsements who would say things like, I protect my voice with Lucky's. And Craven A began marketing its cigarettes under the slogan, for your throat's sake, as early as 1959. But as we later found out, this was nothing but
For your throat's sake. Por el bien de tu garganta. Mejor grita. ¡Ah! No debí gritar. Ni siquiera grité fuerte. Nada más fue raro.
lies, sprinkled with misinformation and topped with a few more lies. It worked though. In 1950s America, 45%, yes, 45% of the population smoked.
What
By
the
the numbers,
fuck?
that would have been close to 70 million people.
Alam.
When medicine proved
Asu.
the associated health risks, companies changed their
Eso
advertising.
es demasiado.
Instead of, we're good
Jesus.
for you, it became, we're not as bad for you as everyone else. And you're gonna smoke anyway, so smoke our product. You know
Okay,
who else put
fair
out a few
enough.
false claims? Thomas Edison. Would you believe that one of the most important inventors of the last 200 years, a man famous for inventing the light bulb, didn't actually invent the light bulb? It's a weird thought, isn't it? Edison managed to file an astounding 1,093 patents, but the light bulb was not one of them. In the year 1800, the first stages of light bulb technology were already in the works thanks to Alessandro Volta.
Alessandro
The main man,
Volta.
Thomas Edison, well, he wasn't even born until 1847, nearly
Ah.
50 years later. A number of people added different elements to the light bulb. Warren de la Rue made Alessandro
Warren de la
Volta's
Rue.
version more efficient.
Me gustan los
in the
nombres de estos
1840s.
tipos. No puedo odiar
English
esos
chemist
nombres.
Joseph Swan improved it again
Joseph
in the
Swan.
1860s. But it was
Suena
Edison
como un
in
tipo muy culto.
1879 who created the cost-effective finishing touches and took it to mass market.
Y muy erótico.
Hardly an original idea, if you ask
No,
us.
no, erótico tal vez no.
Okay, from one famous inventor to another, we have no doubt that you've heard of Albert Einstein.
No he oído de él.
Famous for having a giant brain and creating the theory of relativity. Couldn't even pass math class in high school. How is this possible? It's not, it's a lie. For a long time,
Obviamente.
it was widely believed that the ingenious Einstein actually failed basic math. In truth, it was the complete opposite. He'd already mastered differential and integral calculus by the time he was 15. And just like all kids at that age do in their spare time, he came up with an alternative for the Pythagorean theory, just for fun. For a quick bonus entry, can we get a drum roll, please? This is a modern lie that pops up every single day, and it's called Photoshop. Take a look. Miranda Kerr's waistline was changed for the cover of Vogue. And according to the 2016 Maxim magazine, Priyanka Chopra has no armpits. We have seen Photoshop cover-ups in the media time and time again, and they are not going away anytime soon. Which of these big old lies surprised you?
Esa última en parte la puedo entender. O sea, si estás haciendo una revista y, o sea, hay mucho dinero involucrado en este tipo de cosas, quieres maximizar tus posibilidades dándole a la gente lo que quiere. La gente por algún motivo quiere ver perfección, no entiendo por qué. Entonces pues se la das y listo, porque no te puedes arriesgar en ese tipo de contratos con mucho dinero. Pero sí, o sea, a mí no, o sea, probablemente si le preguntas a los artistas, ¿quieres que te photoshopemos? Dirían, no, solo sácala así y listo. Pero pues así es y ni modo. Y bueno, eso es todo, espero que hayas disfrutado este video, la verdad es que yo lo disfruté un montón. Deja tu like, suscríbete y te ves bastante bien el día de hoy, así que ve por la vida con confianza.